Alright, we're getting ready to take the remaining rust off the speaker. We're going to go ahead and paint the speaker. But before we do, we have to take care of this business right here. Now that we've got everything working, we need to get this thing glued back on here like that. And then the cover, which is right here, will go down over the top. And the two screws, you see there's two holes right there, will fasten to these two screws right there. Okay? So let's get this cemented on. I'm going to take this sandpaper. I'm going to rough up the top of the transformer. I'm going to rough up the bottom of the metal. And I'm going to stick some JB Quick on there. And we're going to hold her in place and let her dry for an hour or so. Then we're going to start removing rust and then tape it off and paint it. Should be about the last thing we have to do. Meanwhile, let's finally, at long last, put the chassis back into the cabinet. And I've got my little rubber bushings right here, all in place. There's one in each corner. I got these from renovatedradios.com, I believe it was. And I have the little bumpers that I also got from renovatedradios.com that slip over the shafts. Doesn't matter which way it goes in. That centerpiece is smack in the middle. Then we put one on each side, and they bump against right here when the shafts go out through the holes. Incidentally, these rubber things have a bad habit of falling out. And sometimes in the process of removing the chassis and putting the chassis back in, they get torn, or pieces get chunks get ripped out of them. So I've found to make things a whole lot easier so they don't get lost. Sometimes they bounce around the floor. It took me 10 hours to find them. Put a little drop of super glue left and right in the hole, and then go ahead and drop it on there. You don't need to gob it up with super glue, just enough to hold it in there, okay? And that'll keep all four of them in place when you slide the chassis in. Now you don't want to slide the chassis. That's a bad term, actually. You want to pick the chassis up, move it in, and set it down. You want to set it down. Now, of course, you're not lifting the chassis way up off the, way up here. You're barely lifting it up off the top of the wood, and then you're clearing enough to clear these cushions. And then you kind of bring it in, and then just set it down on top of the front cushions, okay? And then you go ahead and slide your volume controls and tuning controls through the holes. You got to kind of lift the back up a little bit and kind of wiggle it back and forth until they start to come through. And it's a real slow process. Don't be grabbing these things here and yanking them and pulling them, okay? You have to figure out a way to get the chassis up in one piece, glide it across the top of these cushions, and then as far forward as you can till those bumpers hit the cabinet. And then kind of line it left and right and start shoving it through. And that's done at a very, very slight angle with the front down and the back up when you slide it forward. That last half inch or so, okay? It takes a little bit of a practice, but I do recommend that you glue these things down. Don't let them fall out. In order to keep the chassis centered between both walls of the cabinet, this little device right here goes up in through here, and then a screw goes up through the center and screws into the bottom of the chassis, in the center of the chassis. The problem is I've never seen one totally intact, so I'm not really certain how it works. I can't stick this up in there because it would hit the bottom of the chassis. And it takes a sheet metal screw like this, and I think there's a washer that goes on, and of course you can't put the washer on like that. See, that wouldn't be cool at all. See, that looks dumb. Something wrong here. There's another gasket that's missing. So just by reasoning, I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Like I said, I've never seen one fully intact and actually screwed in to find out what it was like. Over the years, the pieces and parts got lost by the repairmen when they took the chassis in and out. And I even talked to some folks on the Antique Radio Forum one time, and they didn't know how it went. So anyway, what I did was I took a hose, a piece of old vacuum hose, and I'm going to slip that down over the top of there and close the gap between the two. So let me get that done. Now here's the way I'm going to do it. I'm putting the hose on top of that aluminum shaft that sticks up above the bottom gasket. Then I'm going to go ahead and take this flat washer. I don't want to stick that up in there because I'm afraid it's going to break that wood. That's just a wooden ridge right there. I want a flat washer against it. Okay, and then I'm going to. What do you want, Mac? Does Mac want another snacky? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put the washer like that. Stick the whole thing up in there just like that, and screw it into the bottom of the chassis, which will center it into the cabinet. That's the way I'm going to do it. If anybody has any ideas, on how this thing was originally situated, I'd appreciate it. I have yet to find one person that can tell me. Well, as you can see, that replacement on-off switch and tone control that was done by the people at the radio shop years ago, the shaft is a little too long. What we want is something like this, where it's up against the felt. By the way, I made all felt rings for this, for these. I just cut them out of a piece of felt that I have. I use a washer with a hole in the center and then just kind of cut them out. They're not exactly perfectly 1000% round, but it's the best I can do. I recommend that you never put knobs on your radio without a piece of felt behind the knobs, okay? Very important. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my moto tool, my little rotary tool, and I'm going to cutting tool, and I'm going to cut off about, looks like about 1/4 of an inch down in there. It needs to come off. I want this knob tighter against this felt pad. Alright, I've got the old cutting wheel in there, and I've marked the shaft. All I'm going to do is just put it on very low speed and just cut my way right on through it. And once I get done, I'll take some sandpaper and round off the edges, because there's going to be some pretty sharp edges right there. I'll just kind of just burnish them up just to make them nice and smooth so the knob will fit on good. The shaft has been cut. Now, as you can see, it's a round shaft, and the hole takes a flat-sided. But fortunately for us, the shaft is large enough to really go in there nice and tight. So it's only on-off and the tone control. So we can go ahead and stick it on there nice and tight, and it'll work. Works fine. No slippage at all. Nice and tight. The speaker has been derusted, and I've shot it with a coat of primer, as you can see, and I'm doing the finishing touches right now. I'm spraying with the appliance epoxy silver paint, and then when I'm done, I'll put a satin clear coat over the top, and that'll pretty much finish up the speaker. And we get this in, and that should pretty much finish up the project. But we'll see. I've still got to mess with the shadow meter a little bit, I think. As usual, the clear coat I'm going to use, because I still have some left in the can, is just some acrylic indoor-outdoor satin. And it's a protective finish, that's all. I just go ahead and, after I've got the primer and I've got the silver done, or whatever color you're going to paint, I just give it a good shot. I want to make sure it's well protected for the future. That's the whole idea of a restoration, not to show everybody how, oh, I'm so good at this and I can do better than everyone else. No, you're preserving a piece of our history, a piece of American history. You want to do the best job you can for future generations. That's all there is to it. It's not a competition, unless you want to enter a contest somewhere, which I know they do have. But generally speaking, we're not in competition with one another. There's some people that can do things better than others. Brendan, for example, my electronics mentor, he knows so much more about electronics than I'll ever learn. I feel sorry for the guy having to try to teach me stuff. I mean, it's just amazing. When I began to, working on electronics a little bit, I said, well, I've kind of got a little bit of a handle on this, and then I ran into Brendan and I found I didn't have a handle on anything. So, there's always somebody better at something. Well, there she is. Everything is now hooked up. The speaker's back in, been painted back in. The cover's on the speaker. Audio output transformer connections. The shadow meter is in, although I'll have to do a little adjustment on the shadow meter when we fire it back up. But right now it's, oh my goodness, I still have to put a tag back there. I have the tag that goes there. I'll do that next. Alright, there goes the tag on. Finishing touches. So what we have here is a little unfinished business before we complete the video. Not a problem. Okay, your B plus. Here's your shadow meter right here. Your B plus comes out, comes up, comes out of your filter capacitors, comes up, follow the green line, comes up, comes across, and it goes to one side of the shadow meter. Now it also continues on up to the plate of this tube, and it comes up and branches off right here and goes up to the plate of that tube also. The B plus does, but we're not concerned with that. It's just all B plus, and it comes over through this resistor right here, which is a 1000K. I mean a 1K. Get my glasses where I can see better, and it goes up to one side of the shadow meter. Now on the other side of the shadow meter, we have the shadow meter in series with the B plus. So if that shadow meter would have quit, everything on this side would go away. Everything you see here in green would go away. There would be no B plus to the plate of the 6K7. It comes down around, over through all these coils here, on down, comes across to one side of that, to the the other side of the shadow meter. There would also be no B plus. I'm coming up here to this plate on the 6A8. Okay, so the B plus comes into the shadow meter, goes through that coil, that large coil that we adjust, and feeds the plates of these two tubes. So essentially, with this thing in series with that voltage, it becomes an amp meter, an ammeter. All right, and it just sits there, and the needle moves back and forth, depending on how much current these two tubes are drawing and leaving the plate here and leaving the plate here, being crossed over to here, fed into the 6A8, and on through and on through and on through. The bigger the signal, the more the tubes conduct, the more current is being drawn. It's felt through this shadow meter. The shadow meter goes woo back and forth. Instead of a needle showing 200 milliamps, 300 milliamps, 400, instead of all that, it just blocks the light. Just blocks the light. Okay? B plus on one side, current draw on the other, makes the needle go, or flippity flop, or the vein, that light vein, go flippity flop, okay? So, if it gets unplugged, or the shadow meter quits, the coil goes out, end of B plus for these two tubes. That's how it works. Well, the shadow meter is a little bit off on the left side. I can't adjust it in without bending it around, which I don't want to do. It's just something we're going to have to live with. And the dial is a little bit off on frequency, but I'm not going to take it completely back out of the chassis just to pick up a couple of megacycles either way. Again, 80-year-old radio. We're lucky to even have it operational. We're going to call this one restored. I do have reception on all bands, and someone asked whether or not I got anything on the long wave, and yes, I did. I got a little bit of CW. That was it. And it was very faint, but it was there. So that was it. So what we have here is WSM out of Nashville as usual.
Ramblin' Fever, that's Merle Haggard and the Strangers. Good evening, I'm Eddie Subs. It's 11:23.
It's a little bit off on frequency, but a lot of that has to do with some gear slop. It's got a little slop in it, and there's nothing I can do about it. They've worn down over the years, and we just got to live with it. And what we had is no longer what we have now, except for the cloth has a couple of holes here and there, but that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Now that's character. Now, some people will say, no, put a whole new cloth. No, not me. That cloth, there's nothing wrong with it. It's solid as a rock. It's just got a couple of little holes in it. For all I know, they're just moth holes. I don't know what they are, but it's nice and solid. It's not going anywhere. It's not all floppy or anything. It's great. I think it's a very good radio. Anyway, what used to belong to the Reverend Martin Luther Banks Jr. and his wife Maud, and then of course it went to their daughter Janet Banks Carson, and then it was handed down again to Martin Carson, who in turn has sent it to me and given it to me. I will be sending it on to the next deserving person. I will not be keeping this radio. So I think what we're going to do is today we're going to restore this thing. What is today's date? I don't even know what today's date is. I think it's the 24th of June. 2014. And we're going to declare this radio restored as best I can. And I want once again, I want you all to remember, this is the way I do it. The rest of you are expected to do better. I think she looks real nice. It's come a long ways. I appreciate everybody sticking with me.
When you first start looking for a house, it's all fun and shiny and new, but then...
A quick update. I was able to get the shadow meter centered a little bit more. It took about a half an hour of finagling with it, but I was finally able to get it right. Boy, I'll tell you what, that's a touchy little sucker sometimes. I guess they're all that way, that particular kind of... As you can see, it works real good. It's not exactly in the center, but it's a whole lot better than it was, okay? Not too shabby. I just didn't want to send it out with, a lopsided shadow meter. I really like those shadow meters.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
Well, greetings once again from the corner on the deck. We'll just make this part of the final video in this series. I started doing step-by-step radio restorations, antique radio restorations in, I believe it was March of 2008. And I've been doing them one after another, clickety-clickety-click. And it's finally come time for me to stop doing those. I'm ready for a change, So this series that we're ending right now will be the last step-by-step YouTube restoration of antique radios. But that doesn't mean we're all through. No, of course not. I like doing YouTube videos. I like working on radios. It's just that I've done so many now, and from really bad condition, get them up to presentable condition. There's nothing more I can show you. There's nothing left to show you. I mean, if you go back and review the videos that I've done, if you go to the Antique Radio Forum where I started in March of 2008 and look at those postings I did with all the photos, it'll show you everything you could possibly need to know. Sometimes I get a private message from someone. They'll say, well, how do I do this? I just refer them to a video where it was very clear, and they go, oh, that's cool, I didn't see that, or I didn't know that video was there, or whatever. Search around, and I'm not the only guy, okay? There's bunches of other guys that are much better at this than I am, much smarter at electronics, and they'll show you things that maybe I didn't cover. There's plenty of information out there, so there's no need for me to keep doing the same thing over and over and over, repeating. So we're bringing it to a halt. However, we're starting a brand new series. I say we, I'm talking about myself and Brendan. I've already talked to him about it. He's on board, and it'll be in about a month, maybe 45 days when we start this thing. I have to study for my, I want to spend some time doing some other things as well as studying for my extra class ham radio license. I just haven't had a chance to even get started on that. So that's what's going on. No more step-by-step restorations. There's plenty of them out there, plenty of things I've shown. There should be no reason why anyone cannot restore an antique radio based on what's out there. Mine plus others. Radio TV Phono Nut is an excellent example of what I'm talking about. Bob Anderson, he does a tremendous job on television restoration, but a lot of what he does also applies to radio restoration. So you can extrapolate what he has right over to the radios, okay? Anyway, the new series hopefully will start in 30 to 45 days, depending on how much progress I make in my studying for the extra class ham radio. And it's going to involve this radio right here. The first video will involve this radio, and there'll be others to follow, but this is the number one. I picked this up at Salvation Army for $10 maybe a month and a half ago, and it's why I purchased it. It's a nice little radio. It's all messed up and everything, but It's not worth a whole lot. It's just a little $10 plastic radio. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. I hope. The plan is to have fun with this. I want to do something different. You guys deserve something different. So, I'll tell you what. Until next time, this is John.